Look at this, everybody. It's December 6th in northern North Dakota, and I wore short sleeves today. And that ridge that brought us the warm temperatures for Wednesday will continue on into Thursday, bringing us another day of record-breaking temperatures for Thursday. As you can see, up and down the eastern parts of North and South Dakota in particular, we're looking at 50s to 60s, breaking records all up and down there. 54 perhaps down in St. Paul, also breaking record 49 over in Williston. So another warm day in store for Thursday. But unfortunately, right behind this ridge is a trough that's going to be moving through our area and going to be bringing us areas of snow and wind, particularly across North Dakota throughout the day on Friday. And so I'm going to do something a little different this time. I'm going to really zoom in on each of the states, starting off with North Dakota, followed by South Dakota, and then we're going to end with Minnesota. And we're going to watch this system as it travels from west to east Thursday night into Friday and a little bit into Saturday as well. So first we're going to start off in North Dakota. And as you can see up in the upper left-hand corner is the time by local standard, Central Standard Time. So that should help you follow along a little bit easier as to what we're looking at as the timing. So Thursday evening, we're looking at some rain showers, perhaps even, well, maybe a slight chance of some freezing drizzle up into north central parts of North Dakota. But it's really not until you get into midnight Thursday night, early Friday morning, that some of that snow starts to make its way into northwestern parts of North Dakota. But again, really kind of takes its time, and it's really not until probably more so once you get to about noon time frame, once that system really begins to move a little bit quicker, that cold front begins to sag to the southeast. We're going to have some stiff northwesterly winds behind it that's going to be creating blowing and drifting snow, and I'll show you that here in a little bit as well. But as we go through the afternoon and evening hours and then into the night, Friday night and into Saturday morning, it's really not until we get into about Saturday morning at 6 a.m. before all that snow finally exits off to the southeast. And yes, as I just stated, there's going to be plenty of wind with this. And actually, as we get to Friday, early morning hours, 3 a.m., 6 a.m., the wind gusts that you see here are actually out of the southwest. So this is kind of the front edge of the storm. The cold front is actually sitting a little bit back here. These are the northerly winds that will eventually kick in. But out ahead of it, we've got some stronger southwesterly winds. And then as we go through the day on Friday, obviously those winds switch around to more of a north-northwest, and then they kick in a little bit harder, especially as you get into western parts of North Dakota. We're looking at 45 to possibly 50 mile per hour wind gusts across western North Dakota once we get into the evening. Those wind gusts do spread east a little bit, but because we are getting into the evening hours, typically those wind gusts diminish just a little bit, but still we're looking at 35 to 40 miles per hour. Again, possibly creating some lower visibilities, creating some blowing and drifting snow and some slippery road conditions as we go through the night, Friday night and into Saturday morning. Now, of course, as we get more so into Saturday, those winds diminish, and by that point, all the snow has already moved away from the state. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of how the visibility will diminish as the winds and the snow move through, this kind of just gives you a rough idea. Again, the purple is less than a mile. Sometimes when you get into the darker purple or so, it gets to be about a half mile or so, but that just kind of gives you the timing. Again, you can kind of see the local timestamp up above me here just to kind of give you an idea of when those lower visibilities will move through the state. Predicted snowfall amounts with this particular system as it quickly moves through. Generally, as you get north of I-94 is where the amounts are a little bit more, where we're looking at that inch, perhaps a little bit more, especially as you get to the northwestern parts of North Dakota, where we could pick up 3 to 4, maybe even an isolated 5-inch, perhaps up there, and then up in the Turtle Mountain range area, the Turtle Mountains as we call it up there, the higher elevations of some hills, there again, somewhere 3, maybe 4 inches of snow up in those higher elevations. But generally, as you get a little bit further south and you get south of I-94, we're looking at an inch or less. All right, the timing for the snow across South Dakota to move through obviously is going to be a little bit later. We're going to start here 3 p.m. on Friday, and you can see just starting to make its way into northwestern parts of the state. And as we get into the overnight hours, and here we are at midnight Friday night, early Saturday morning, just kind of basically from Aberdeen to Pierre. And then as we get into early Saturday morning, 3 And 6 a.m., much like North Dakota, most of it's gone. It still lingers a little bit here down in southeastern parts of South Dakota. But by and large, by the time we get to 9 a.m. and certainly by noon on Saturday, it looks like at this point, most of the snow will have moved out of the state. And taking a look at those wind gusts, and actually we're going to start off here for South Dakota on Thursday already. And these are going to be westerly winds mainly blowing across parts of South Dakota, 35, perhaps 40 miles per hour at times. But it's really not until you get more so into Friday afternoon when those winds begin to switch out of the northwest. Here's that wind switch essentially, where you can see the winds diminish and lighten up just a little bit. That's probably where the cold front is at. And so back behind that is where we got the stronger north-northwest winds. And again, gusting up to 45, perhaps 50 miles per hour across western parts of South Dakota Friday night into early Saturday morning. And then as we get in through the day on Saturday, those winds hanging on just a little bit. It might not be until closer to 3 p.m. until those winds diminish just a little bit more. And here again, just to take a look at the timing of when the winds are going to be kicking in along with the snow that's going to be falling. Look at the timestamp once again up in the just up above me here. We are at 3 p.m. on Friday, and those visibilities begin to drop across the state, moving from northwest to southeast Friday night, early Saturday morning. This is midnight, 3 a.m., 6 a.m. and then by 9 a.m. Saturday, most everywhere should have those visibilities improve as that snow begins to push off to the southeast. Now, of course, as you would expect, just because what I showed you earlier with North Dakota, most of the snowfall will occur north of I-94. So, of course, as you get into South Dakota, really not expecting a whole lot in the way of accumulation, maybe a half inch to perhaps an inch up in these higher elevations, the Sisseton Plateau, I guess I call it anyway. And then in the higher elevations of the Black Hills is where where you might see up to an inch of accumulation as this quick little system moves through. And finally for Minnesota, of course, that snow doesn't really move in until we get into Friday evening. Here we are at about 6 to 9 p.m. by the time those snow showers begin to move into northwestern parts of the state. And then actually as it heads to the southeast, here we are Saturday at 3, 6 a.m., 9 a.m., noon on Saturday, and then 3 p.m. on Saturday. Not a whole lot of moisture with it. Actually, a lot more moisture begins to fall really early up in the northwestern parts of North Dakota. But again, as we kind of take a look at it, there's not a long, large band of snow, especially as it goes across Minnesota, just a narrow little band that moves through. Now, the one other thing to just keep an eye on a little bit as we get into early Saturday morning, we do have a separate system that wants to pull off out of the southern plains. And as it does so, it might just shave the southeastern part of the state with some rain and perhaps some snow as well. So we could pick up a little bit of an accumulation down here early, especially as we get into Saturday morning, and that little part of the system quickly moves off to the northeast. And those wind gusts again, picking it up here Friday noon or so. These are west-southwesterly winds again as we're looking at 30-35 miles per hour. And then as we get into the overnight Friday night and into Saturday morning, again, those winds switch around to the northwest and take a little bit to move through the state. Here we are 6 a.m. Saturday morning, and we're only looking at 30-35 mile per hour wind gusts at this moment. And they just they try to move east a little bit, but they don't do a really great job. Generally speaking, the winds really not looking all that stiff across Minnesota at this point. Perhaps gusting late Saturday, particularly across the North Shore, across the Arrowhead area, where we're looking at 35 to maybe 40 miles per hour as we get into more so Saturday night. And to get a timing off that snow and wind is basically up and through here. This over here is where they're predicting some fog to perhaps form as we get into the night, Friday night and Saturday morning. So generally speaking, if you're worried more so about the wind and the snow, ignore this. Take a look at this area up in the northwestern part of the state as we go through the overnight hours, and look how that continues to spread eastward, much as you would expect. But again, light snow, not a ton of wind, so really the visibilities shouldn't go down that much across Minnesota, and actually across South Dakota as well. Really won't diminish a whole lot. The roads will be a little bit better across Minnesota and South Dakota. It's mainly across North Dakota where we're going to be concerned. So with all that said, really all we're looking at, the most we're probably going to see is up here in the northwestern part of the state, where we could perhaps see an inch or so up there. Otherwise, most areas are looking at a ½ inch or less across Minnesota as we go through Friday and Saturday. Now, once we get past that quick hitting system, really not a whole lot behind that. We have perhaps a little bit of a disturbance going into Sunday night and early Monday morning that might affect western parts of South Dakota, but really that's about it. It looks like it's going to remain fairly quiet. And while we'll have this blast of cold air associated with this system, we've got just a little bit of a warm up to start next week, and then we've got maybe just a little bit of a reinforcement of colder air. And then perhaps as we get into the later part of next week, we could be in for another warm-up, and that wouldn't be bad at all. But for now, let's take a look at the 7-day high temperature forecast. So for Thursday, we're looking at those highs, of course, around 70 degrees across South Dakota, getting into the mid-50s across southern Minnesota, mid to upper 30s across the Arrowhead, and mid-40s across North Dakota. And of course, Friday does cool off, where we're looking at those high temperatures in the low 50s across southern parts of our region, up further to the northwest around Williston, where they could be getting the potential of some snow up there. Of course, we're going to be struggling to get above freezing for some of you up in the northwestern part of the state. Saturday, that cold front continues to sweep through, so of course those temperatures are going to struggle a bit to get up there on Saturday. So high temperatures are going to be below freezing across at least half of our region. Once you get further to the south, we're looking at the mid to upper 30s. Sunday, those freezing temperatures recede just a little bit. As you can see, the northern third or so remain below freezing. While we get further to the south, we start to get back into the low 40s. Monday, there's that reinforcing shot of cold air. Tuesday, that cold air lingers just a little bit, but you can already see the effects of that warm up perhaps on Tuesday as we start to see temperatures rebounding into the low 40s across southwestern parts of South Dakota. So there you have it, kind of a detailed look of our one little storm system that comes through, probably going to reduce visibilities, make things a little slippery, especially across North Dakota, mainly across North Dakota. South Dakota, Minnesota, not looking quite as bad, but just a little blast of cold air after we have another record warm day, the way it's looking across the region for Thursday. And then not too bad beyond the weekend once again. So, man, it's still looking more and more like we are going to have a brown Christmas. I'll keep my fingers crossed. I know you will too. But in the meantime, meteorologist Brad Warner for Region Weather Live. Everybody have a good day.